Snow falls in relentless sheets, coating pine trees and muddy roads in a gray-white silence. The air is sharp, every breath a cloud that vanishes into the cold. In the center of Bastogne, American troops huddle in foxholes and shattered buildings, their helmets rimmed with frost, fingers stiff with ice. Tanks groan across frozen fields, engines cutting to the quiet like distant thunder. Beyond the village, dark silhouettes of German panzers loom through the mist. Recon reports whisper of encirclement, of collapse, of panic. But inside Bastogne, the men move with a stubborn rhythm, digging, reinforcing, and waiting. The artillery falls in thuds that shake the ground underfoot, each explosion sending shards of frozen earth into the air. Every road into the Ardennes seems a trap, every hill a potential ambush. Yet here, in the cold heart of Belgium, the Americans hold. Rumors of fear and surrender reach German ears, carried in intercepted messages. But the truth on the ground is different. Every sentry, every medic, every radio operator fights not just the enemy, but the snow, the ice, and the exhaustion that gnaws at morale. In the midst of this frozen siege, a message flies across the airwaves. Nuts! A single word that will echo through history. Bastogne is under threat, encirclement imminent, and yet the American resolve is unbroken. From these frozen roads and shattered buildings, the Ardennes will see a stand that defies expectations, and it will force both sides to reconsider everything they thought they knew about courage, command, and survival. December 1944. The Ardennes forest, a dense tangle of firs and beech, stretches across eastern Belgium, northern Luxembourg, and western Germany. For centuries, it had been a natural barrier, a slow-moving labyrinth that turned armies into hunters and prey. Now it will become the stage for one of the last desperate German offensives of the war, the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler had gambled on speed and surprise. He concentrated nearly 250,000 men, 7,500 artillery pieces, and over 1,000 tanks along a 90-mile front, aiming to pierce the thinly held American lines. The objective was audacious: reach Antwerp, split the Allied forces, and force a negotiated peace. Intelligence reports within the German high command were confident. They believed the Americans were inexperienced, untested under winter conditions, and prone to panic. Bastogne, a small Belgian town at a critical crossroads, appeared as the keystone in the route to victory. Intercepted messages, Axis reconnaissance, and overconfident analysis painted a picture of an easy victory, a town that would crumble before the Wehrmacht's armored thrust. For the Americans, the picture was far different. Bastogne was defended primarily by elements of the 101st Airborne Division, newly arrived and lightly equipped for winter warfare. Reinforced by the 10th Armored Division and other scattered units, the defenders were a patchwork force, aware of the strategic importance of the 7 roads that converged on the town. Holding Bastogne meant delaying the German advance, buying precious time for reinforcements, and preventing the Axis from breaking the Allied front. The forest itself was both a shield and a trap. Thick stands of trees blocked lines of sight, forcing engagements at close range. Snow and ice hampered movement, transforming roads into treacherous ribbons of mud and frozen ruts. The cold penetrated every layer of clothing, sapped morale, and threatened frostbite and exhaustion. Supply lines were stretched thin, rations were scarce, and ammunition had to be rationed carefully. Air support, a decisive factor in previous engagements, was grounded by low clouds and heavy snow, leaving the defenders largely on their own. On the German side, commanders expected a quick collapse. Axis intelligence painted American troops as unsteady, relying on local reports that exaggerated panic and disorganization. Intercepted communications described desperate requests for reinforcement and widespread fear among U.S. units. From Berlin to the forward panzer divisions, there was an assumption that encirclement would break the Americans without prolonged fighting. But the reality in Bastogne was starkly different. The soldiers dug deep into foxholes, converted barns and shattered houses into defensive positions, and laid anti-tank obstacles along narrow streets. Scouts moved cautiously through snow-laden fields, mapping enemy positions with the precision of men who knew that a single misstep could be fatal. Every American soldier understood the stakes. Failure meant not only defeat at Bastogne, but the collapse of the entire Ardennes line. By December 19th, German spearheads had reached the outskirts of the town. Tanks rumbled through the snowy valleys. Artillery boomed in the distance, and Luftwaffe reconnaissance planes traced shadows above the cloud line. Yet, inside Bastogne, commanders such as Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe assessed the situation with calm pragmatism. Reinforcements would arrive, even if slowly. Defensive positions were reinforced, and morale, though tested, remained unbroken. The convergence of forces, harsh winter conditions, and the misinterpretation of American morale set the stage for a confrontation that would test leadership, endurance, and adaptability. Axis reports projected fear. On the ground, the truth was different. Bastogne would not yield. The men holding the town would fight not as passive pawns, but as determined defenders, ready to defy the expectations of the enemy and the assumptions of history. From this tense preparation, the battle would escalate, shaping not only the Ardennes offensive, but also the wider course of the war in Western Europe. And within these snow-covered streets, the human story, the endurance, fear, and courage of soldiers on both sides, would unfold with a clarity that intercepted reports could never capture. By December 20th, the Ardennes had become a frozen battlefield. Snowdrifts piled against walls, clinging to the eaves of half-destroyed houses. Roads, narrow and winding, had turned into rutted tracks of ice and mud, slowing the movement of men, vehicles, and supplies. The cold was more than discomfort. It was a weapon. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes, numbness dulled reflexes, and exhaustion seeped into every decision. Yet the Americans adapted, turning adversity into a tool of survival. Within Bastogne, improvisation was constant. Soldiers repurposed barns and cellars as command posts. Sandbags were stacked against windows to absorb artillery shrapnel. Every obstacle, fallen trees, snow-laden hedgerows, abandoned vehicles, became a potential defensive asset. Supply shortages forced ingenuity. Ammunition rationed, radios repaired with wire scavenged from wrecked vehicles, and field kitchens converted into makeshift medical stations. Even under bombardment, men maintained routines, rotating sentries, delivering water, and reinforcing defenses. It was a town transformed into a fortress not by engineering, but by sheer resolve. German intelligence, meanwhile, operated on assumptions that were increasingly detached from reality. Reports filtered to the Panzer divisions that Americans were demoralized, that panic had spread to the 101st Airborne, and that resistance would crumble under encirclement. Propaganda from Axis commanders described Bastogne as a trapped and desperate garrison, one that would surrender with minimal effort. In truth, these reports were colored by wishful thinking and a reliance on intercepted messages that lacked context. Every call for reinforcements from the American side had been framed as desperate by German analysts, but the men in Bastogne were far from panicked. They were calculating, disciplined, and determined. The terrain amplified this misjudgment. Bastogne's position, at a network of 7 critical roads, made it a natural bottleneck. German commanders expected their armored units to sweep through, forcing collapse. Yet snow, mud, and American artillery slowed every advance. Every street and intersection became a potential trap. Every farmhouse a defended strongpoint. The more the Germans pressed, the more their own reports contradicted their assumptions. Meanwhile, morale among U.S. troops was bolstered by leadership. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's calm presence, combined with clear communication between units, reinforced confidence. Soldiers relied on each other, forming bonds forged in cold, mud, and gunfire. Even amid constant shelling and armored assaults, there was a sense of purpose. Bastogne could not fall, and each man understood that his endurance mattered not just for himself, but for the survival of the broader front. The stage was set. German confidence met American ingenuity. Encirclement loomed, but within Bastogne, every foxhole, every barricade, and every frozen breath represented defiance. The snow-covered town would soon become the fulcrum upon which the Ardennes offensive balanced. And it was here, amid misreported fears and unyielding resistance, that the human, tactical, and technological threads of the battle began to weave together, a story of resilience that the Axis had grossly underestimated. The men of Bastogne were soldiers first, but in the snow and mud of December 1944, they were also survivors, improvisers, and unwilling heroes. Frost clung to their boots. Ice formed on rifles and helmets. Fingers cracked inside gloves. Faces burned red from wind that cut like a knife. Yet exhaustion did not break them. Foxholes were carved into frozen earth. Basements became command posts, and every hour spent huddled in the bitter cold became an act of defiance. Morale hinged on small routines and gestures. Coffee boiled over makeshift stoves. Letters from home were read and reread. Jokes whispered despite the rumble of artillery. Medics worked tirelessly, treating frostbite, shrapnel wounds, and the invisible toll of fear. Soldiers shared rations, water, and cigarettes, tiny tokens that strengthened bonds beyond rank or division. Even under bombardment, panic was absent. Reports of encirclement reached the town, but fear did not translate into surrender. Instead, it hardened resolve. Every sentry, every artillery operator, every soldier in a foxhole understood that Bastogne was more than a town. It was a test of endurance. Human courage became a weapon as potent as any gun or tank. Tactical angle, 250 to 300 words. Bastogne's significance was its geography. 7 key roads converge here, arteries of movement for both German advance and Allied reinforcement. Holding the crossroads meant delaying the Panzer divisions and disrupting the German timetable. For McAuliffe and his staff, this translated into a defense that relied on positioning, improvisation, and the exploitation of terrain. Anti-tank obstacles were improvised from felled trees, abandoned vehicles, and rubble. Artillery was positioned to create interlocking fields of fire, each shell calculated to slow or channel the German advance. Patrols scouted every ridge and alley, reporting enemy movements and adjusting defensive positions. Even small units became tactical multipliers. A single platoon could hold a street against superior numbers if properly dug in and supported. The Germans, expecting a rapid collapse, found themselves funneled into well-defended zones. Tank columns were slowed by snow and ice. Infantry faced obstacles that turned open roads into kill zones. Every tactical miscalculation compounded. Axis assumptions that encirclement would induce surrender clashed with American discipline. Bastogne was defended not with overwhelming numbers, but with the calculated use of terrain, observation, and timing. Technological angle, 250 to 300 words. Weapons and equipment were decisive, but not always in predictable ways. The 101st Airborne and supporting units relied on rifles, bazookas, and mortars, while artillery fired relentlessly into approaching panzer columns. Communication relied on field radios, often repaired on the spot from scavenged parts, which allowed coordination despite weather and enemy interference. Armor was a double-edged sword. German tanks advanced through snow-choked roads, but were slowed and channeled by obstacles and American anti-tank measures. Bazooka teams, hidden in barns or behind hedgerows, struck at vulnerable flanks. Artillery, from both sides, shaped the battlefield more than sheer infantry numbers. Even air power played a delayed but decisive role. Snowstorms grounded Allied aircraft initially, leaving the defenders isolated. Yet the eventual arrival of supply drops, parachutes carrying ammunition, rations, and even Christmas packages provided a technological lifeline. Radios transmitted not just orders, but morale, messages from commanders, updates on reinforcements, reports of German movements, all amplified by ingenuity and resourcefulness. In Bastogne, technology was not just hardware, it was adaptation. Every frozen wire, every improvised barricade, every mortar emplacement represented a marriage of human ingenuity and mechanical power. It was this combination that allowed a lightly equipped force to withstand one of the largest German offensives of the war. At the heart of Bastogne's defense stood Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, a man whose calm presence would become legendary. Faced with the threat of encirclement and superior German forces, he assessed the situation with clarity and resolve. McAuliffe did not sugarcoat the danger. He understood the vulnerability of his scattered units, the fragility of supply lines, and the harshness of the Ardennes winter. Yet, his decisions reflected an unwavering focus. Hold Bastogne at all costs. Command was decentralized, relying on subordinate officers to interpret intent and act decisively. Communication lines were improvised, radios repaired in foxholes, and couriers braved snow and shellfire to carry orders. McAuliffe's famed response to the German demand for surrender, "Nuts," was more than defiance. It was a signal that leadership had confidence in both strategy and soldiers. On the German side, commanders faced their own pressures. Generals like Otto von Manschenfeld and Sepp Dietrich underestimated American resilience, influenced by faulty intelligence and overconfidence. Tactical decisions were rigid, relying on speed and shock, leaving little room for adaptation when faced with unexpected resistance. Leadership under stress in both armies became a critical factor. One side inspired determination, the other overestimated victory. Enemy perspective angle, 250 to 300 words. German intelligence portrayed Bastogne as a town on the brink of panic. Intercepted communications described desperate calls for reinforcements and assumed widespread demoralization among U.S. troops. This perception guided German strategy. Speed over caution, concentration over reconnaissance, expecting surrender rather than sustained defense. Yet these reports were flawed. The Americans were disciplined, aware of the stakes, and prepared to resist. German panzer units, advancing through snow and limited visibility, encountered well-positioned artillery and anti-tank obstacles. Infantry met unexpected resistance at every crossroads. Every assumption of panic was disproved on the ground, yet German command continued to rely on outdated or misinterpreted intelligence. This disconnect between expectation and reality highlights a recurring theme in warfare. Intelligence can mislead, especially when confirmation bias shapes analysis. Axis planners anticipated fear. They received courage. They expected surrender. They found resolve. Bastogne, from the enemy's perspective, became a lesson in the limits of observation and the hazards of underestimating an opponent. Moral/propaganda angle, 250 to 300 words. Bastogne also became a symbol beyond its tactical value. Axis reports of American panic were circulated internally and, in some cases, as propaganda to boost German morale, suggesting that Allied defenses were crumbling. Across the front, soldiers and commanders were fed a narrative of inevitable success, reinforcing confidence in the offensive. For the Americans, the story of Bastogne would emerge differently. News of the siege, McAuliffe's defiant "nuts" reply, and the successful holding of the town circulated among troops and civilians, creating a narrative of resilience and courage. Propaganda, both official and unofficial, transformed Bastogne into a symbol of the unbreakable American soldier. Morale, often intangible, became a force multiplier, shaping how units perceived themselves and the enemy. On both sides, information was weaponized. The Axis assumed it could leverage fear. The Allies, in time, leveraged tenacity. Bastogne was not only a battlefield, but also a story contested in minds as much as in streets. Perception shaped reality, and in this case, the morale and determination of American forces rewrote what German intelligence had predicted. December 21st, 1944. Bastogne lies under a blanket of snow and tension. Artillery fire shakes the ground like distant earthquakes, sending frozen dirt and splinters of wood into the air. The German advance has intensified, with armored columns pushing through the Ardennes icy roads, while infantry follow, determined to secure the town. Every hill, every road, every farmhouse is contested, and the Americans know the danger of even a single breakthrough. Panzer divisions attempt to encircle the town. Tanks advance in column formation along the narrow streets, only to find themselves channeled into kill zones. Bazooka teams lie in wait behind hedgerows, barns, and shell-pocked walls, striking vulnerable flanks. Mortars arc explosive rounds into enemy positions, disrupting supply lines and slowing the armored thrust. For the Americans, every defensive position, every small detour, every trap set in the snow is amplified by knowledge of the terrain and timing of enemy movements. In the streets, soldiers move with purpose. Infantry squads rotate between observation posts, foxholes, and trenches. Medics dash through gunfire to treat the wounded. Scouts report back enemy positions, noting tank movements, artillery concentrations, and infantry formations. Communication is vital. Field radios, repaired from scavenged wires, relay instructions from McAuliffe to subordinate commanders. Messages crisscross the town, each one a lifeline that keeps the defense coherent under extreme pressure. The German commanders, expecting panic, find themselves confronting resilience. Reports of supposed surrender requests never materialize. Every signal intercepted is analyzed and interpreted in light of the Axis assumption that American morale is fragile. Yet the defenders hold their ground. Bastogne is no longer just a town. It is a fortress, a choke point that slows the entire German timetable. Every hour gain strengthens the American position and buys time for reinforcements. Winter itself becomes an ally to the defenders. Snow and ice hamper German mobility. Frozen roads cause tanks to slip and stall, while infantry struggle through deep drifts. Artillery and supply convoys must navigate treacherous terrain, making coordination difficult. Air support, grounded by thick cloud cover, cannot intervene. The Americans are isolated, but isolation sharpens their focus. Every soldier knows that the cost of error is total collapse. Morale under fire is tested. The constant threat of encirclement and bombardment weighs heavily. Yet McAuliffe's leadership radiates through the ranks. His calm assessments, presence at command posts, and decisions under pressure convey a singular message: Bastogne must hold. When a German envoy delivers a formal surrender ultimatum, the one-word reply, "Nuts," echoes across the snowy streets. It is defiance crystallized, a psychological blow to the enemy, and a signal that the town's fate will be determined by action, not rumor. As December 21st progresses, the battle intensifies further. German assaults hit the outer edges of Bastogne, probing for weaknesses. American positions absorb the attacks. Artillery responds with precision, and small units exploit the frozen terrain to create ambushes. Each failed breakthrough frustrates German commanders, who begin to reassess the reports that predicted easy victory. The longer Bastogne holds, the more the Wehrmacht's timetable unravels. By the evening, snow continues to fall, blanketing the streets in white, masking the devastation below. Every barn, every wall, every foxhole bears witness to the fight. The defenders are exhausted but unbroken. The enemy is frustrated, misled by faulty intelligence and unanticipated resistance. Bastogne is no longer just a waypoint in the Ardennes offensive. It is the fulcrum on which the German advance teeters. And as night falls, the storm outside mirrors the storm within. The battle is far from over, but the resolve of the American defenders has begun to shape the course of the engagement. The coming hours will test every measure of endurance, leadership, and tactical ingenuity. The true turning point is approaching, and it will confirm that Bastogne will not yield to fear, rumor, or numerical superiority. December 22nd to 23rd, 1944. Bastogne remains encircled, but the first signs of relief approach. Patton's Third Army, moving at forced marches through snowbound roads, closes in from the south. Columns of Sherman tanks crunch through ice and mud, their engines reverberating across the frozen hills. For the defenders in Bastogne, the sound is faint at first, a distant promise, a signal that the tide may yet turn. Inside the town, American troops remain vigilant. German artillery continues to pound streets and buildings, but each assault is met with stubborn resistance. Infantry units coordinate ambushes along narrow alleys, while bazooka teams target tanks immobilized by snow and obstacles. Every meter gained by the enemy costs them dearly. Every failed breakthrough chips away at their timetable and morale. Axis commanders, meanwhile, are beginning to realize their intelligence failures. Reports of American panic prove false. Radio intercepts, previously interpreted as signs of desperation, are revealed as routine communications under siege conditions. The German offensive, once confident and swift, begins to falter. Tanks become bogged in icy ditches. Infantry are slowed by snow and scattered defensive fire, and coordination breaks down under continuous harassment from American forces. December 24th arrives with grim clarity. Relief is near, and the German push cannot achieve its objective. Patton's forces reach positions just south of Bastogne, bringing tanks, artillery, and fresh infantry to bear. Coordinated attacks now threaten the encircling German units, forcing them to divert attention from the town itself. Communication breakdowns and logistical bottlenecks leave the Axis armored divisions vulnerable to both defensive fire and counterattacks. The psychological impact is decisive. American troops, buoyed by the approach of reinforcements, hold faster, fight harder, and exploit every weakness. German units, once confident of an easy collapse, now face exhaustion, failed assaults, and mounting casualties. What began as an expected encirclement has become a stalemate that increasingly favors the defenders. Bastogne, small and beleaguered, has held against one of the Wehrmacht's most ambitious winter offensives. By December 26, the siege is effectively broken. American forces have reestablished partial control of the surrounding areas. Supply lines are restored, and the German timetable is irreparably disrupted. The Ardennes offensive, designed to crush the Allies, is beginning to unravel. Bastogne has not only survived, it has become a symbol of resilience, coordination, and leadership under pressure. The turning point is undeniable. German forces, once advancing with overwhelming strength, are forced into defensive postures themselves. Bastogne's defenders, through endurance, tactical ingenuity, and sheer determination, have reshaped the battlefield. The rumors of fear and surrender, which had circulated so widely in German intelligence, now collapse under the reality of American tenacity. As the snow continues to fall over the town, the streets scarred by artillery and armored skirmishes, a broader lesson emerges. In war, assumptions can be fatal. Intelligence may mislead, terrain may challenge, and numbers may intimidate, but leadership, morale, and human resolve can redefine the outcome of even the most desperate engagements. Bastogne, battered yet unbroken, stands as proof. From this decisive moment, the aftermath of the Ardennes offensive will unfold. A reckoning of losses, a reassessment of strategy, and a testament to the endurance of soldiers under fire.